The winners and losers in life are determined when the teams are picked. There are two teams that are essential for your success. The first are those that select you to be on their team, and the second are those you select to be on your team. Most marketers are tacticians. And so to them, their single tactic or their group of tactics is their strategy. But a tactic is not a strategy, and a strategy is not an outcome.
Whatever it is, whatever you do, just take that extra little bit of time, even though it feels like you don't have it, and it will be a monumental difference in the long run.
When you sell ideas, when you sell information, what you're talking about is changing body, mind, or soul, right? You're talking about something that other people have different values and beliefs on than you, and so you're changing someone's mind. That's very different than selling a commodity. Roy H. Williams says, to win the customer's money, you must first win their time.
Before I ever wrote the book, I had a podcast. Before I ever wrote the book, I had a YouTube channel. I did public speaking in the industry. People wanted my book because they were supporting me as their friend or somebody that they knew, and it gained momentum there. Then when they read it and realized, wow, this guy, actually did a reasonable job writing this, I should recommend this to some other people. Then all of a sudden that started to take off.
None of the bestseller lists are real. They don't count real sales in real time. They're more like sophisticated polls that have other algorithms outside of sales. So it's become, and they've added more and more and more detail to that. What they attempt to do is validate, in their estimation, why a book is selling, why they're seeing the sales. And if they can't validate why they believe the book is selling, then they exclude the book from the list.
Too many times we allow the emotion to get in and cloud our judgment when the reality is, numbers tell you.
You don't need to consume a 1,500-page book today, but if you read one page today, in 3 years, you'll get through it and you'll be able to retain that information to be able to use it.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. And today I've got a guest that many of you are going to thank me for having on once you hear this episode, even though we haven't even started talking yet. I know, trust me. Michael Drew has had 131 consecutive books go to the New York Times bestseller list based on using the tools his company teaches authors in order to promote, and his services that he uses in conjunction with those tools. So, having written a couple of books myself, I'm going to spend the next few minutes learning all the things I did wrong from Michael so that next time I can just do the easy thing and have him handle all of this stuff for me, and I can focus on what I do best, which is, well, we're still figuring that out. So anyhow, Michael, welcome to Power Producers. We're glad to have you. I know that my audience is full of people who are actively or thinking about how to get what's in their brain onto paper in a way that will drive a change, whether it be client facing or just industry facing or self-improvement or whatever. So I'm really excited for us to talk because I have a feeling you're going to help a lot of people who hear this today.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. I'm excited to be here.
So talk a little bit about your background and what got you to where you're at right now. And then I want to dig into kind of what you do and the things that you've learned. And obviously we don't want to give away any secret sauce or anything, but I do think that we need to have some tactical stuff that we can hand down so people can recognize, hey, you know what? Michael's probably a guy I need to know. I probably need to engage with him because I can tell y'all, if you've never written a book, but you're thinking about doing it, self-publishing on Amazon is something that's relatively easy. But if you want to get reach, you really need somebody who's a professional. And I think that our industry, by and large, is very hypocritical in the fact that we want to outsource or we want to self-source everything we can when it comes to our stuff. But we get pissed off when we have a client that wants to shop us or wants to go direct to Progressive or somebody online and get their own quotes and cut us out of the middle. When the reality is, what's our argument? Well, we're the experts. We do this every day. We're the best at what we do. They should use our advice, and they would be much better off if they did. Listen to the podcast with that mind frame, and you're going to be fine today. So, all that to say, Michael, let it rip.
So, real quick background. When I was 17, I decided to leave home with a young lady and be homeless in Washington State around Seattle and sell drugs, and did that for about a year. And then decided, that's not really the life for me. Went back home. I'm from Provo, Utah originally, and became the manager at a Burger King. And then I met a young lady who was a student at BYU, at Brigham Young University, and we got married, and she said I was too smart to manage a Burger King. So to note, we're starting with the context that I'm a high school dropout, right? So but I was too smart to manage a Burger King. And so my then wife said to get another job. She helped me find a job at a company called Executive Excellence. Executive Excellence was a division of the Covey Leadership Center before it merged with Franklin and became Franklin Covey. And we sold a magazine called Executive Excellence. And within the first 3 months, I became the number 3 salesperson within the organization, selling the magazine to corporations. And that's only significant because the 1, 2, 4, and 5 salesperson people had been there for more than 5 years, and they were just now renewing new subscriptions. So I was bringing in new revenue. And then the merger between Franklin and Covey, Franklin Day Planners and the Covey Leadership Center merged and became Franklin Covey.
I was going to pull mine up and show it to you because it's sitting in my briefcase, usually on my desk, but I didn't have it sitting here today. I still use one today, believe it or not.
Yeah, day planners are amazing, whether the physical or digital as well. So when the merger happened, the executive editor of the magazine, Ken Shelton, was given the magazine as payment for ghostwriting 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And so Ken came to me and said, hey, Mike, we publish all these great authors in our magazines. Why don't we start publishing their books? And I'm like 18 and a half. And I'm like, yeah, let's do that. And so we set up a publishing company, and I failed miserably for a year, but I learned everything about the industry and setting up that publishing company and impressed some fairly important people in the industry. And because of that, I got a job offer from legendary business book publisher Ray Bard of Bard Press fame. He did the Wizard of Ads trilogies. He did the Jeffrey Gitomer series, Little Red Book of Selling, Little Black Book of Connections. He did the One Thing that I did with him with Gary Keller, and so on and so forth, right? And so he had just come off a huge success with his book, not Southwest Airlines Crazy Recipe for Success.
And Herb Kelleher's book, I've read it. Yeah. I've read all of Gitmer's books. I mean, you're speaking my language.
Yep. So he just come off of that success, and he was looking to bring somebody to take the company to the next level and do more bestsellers. So the referral was made. He hired me. First day on the job, Ray Bard said to me, Michael, we publish business authors. What our authors want more than anything else in the world is to be a New York Times best-selling author. What I want you to do is go figure out how the New York Times bestseller list works. So what I did as a young, naive 19-year-old was called them on the phone, literally called them on the phone and said, hey, I work at Bard Press. How does your bestseller list work? And the folks at Wall Street Journal and USA Today and Business Week and New York Times, they all kind of laughed and said, hey, keep calling back, kid, and we'll have, we can become friends, right? And so I slowly started gathering information and data from the various lists about how they ran. And the first book launch that I worked on for Ray Bard was a book titled Secret Formulas of the Wizard of Ads by Roy H. Williams. Roy is the 4th largest buyer of radio advertising in North America. He's a living legend in marketing and advertising today. We were able to leverage his platform, which was buying radio media on behalf of his clients, to be able to get, of the roughly 1,000 US stations, 860 of them to buy 20 copies of the book, pre-buy 20 copies of the book, and run 200 radio ads promoting the book. And because I didn't fully understand how the list worked, we way overshot it, which is fine. So we hit number 1 on the Wall Street Journal and number 3 on the New York Times versus just making the list. So that was my first of now a total of 131 consecutive New York Times best-selling books. That's how I got my start.
There you go. So what are you doing today? You've learned all of this stuff, right? You've had 131 consecutive books that you've worked with go bestseller. That's not an easy task, I'm assuming. I mean, yeah, probably easier than it was when you first started trying to figure it out. But I mean, it's certainly not easier it's not easy for somebody like me who's like got a great idea and fighting chance of actually writing something meaningful that people would want to listen or read, but I can't get it in front of them because they don't know I exist, right? That's the biggest thing. So take it away.
So first of all, actually, the New York Times has become more difficult to make over time than easier. One of the things to note is that none of the bestseller lists are real. They don't count real sales in real time. They're more like sophisticated polls that have other algorithms outside of sales. So it's become, and they've added more and more and more detail to that. What they attempt to do is validate, in their estimation, why a book is selling, why they're seeing the sales. And if they can't validate why they believe the book is selling, then they exclude the book from the list. So it's become more difficult over the years. When I ran Secret Formulas, that campaign, we put sales through Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Today, we have to put sales through hundreds of independent stores, the top 5 book chains, and there's an algorithm, and then we have to hit media and online media and all the other standards to qualify. But to answer your question, what I learned as a publisher was the rule set of publishing and the bestseller list. That was really what I learned. But what's most relevant to your audience is what I learned when I first started my company. After being a publisher, I was a publisher for about 7 years. And when I left, I actually went from Bard Press to Longstreet Press to Entrepreneur Magazine as the book publisher at Entrepreneur Magazine. And when I got the entrepreneurial spirit and started my own company, the first year out, I put 7 books on the New York Times bestsellers list. I delivered exactly what I promised my clients, and about half of them were not happy with me. Not because I didn't deliver exactly what I promised, but because what their expectation of what would occur when I delivered what I promised did not occur. And so what I learned was, as a publisher, I didn't have a responsibility to my client's business or platform, just to the rule set of publishing. But as a marketing company, what I had to learn was how what we call marketing platforms are built and leveraged and grow, so that when we do the work to promote a book to the New York Times bestsellers list, we're doing it in a capacity not just to hit the standards, but to do it in a way that grows the business in some way. And so I've spent the majority of the last 20 years, after leaving being a publisher, being a student of building influencer and thought leadership platforms. And one of the things you said at the very start of your call is really, really important, which is that there's a way to engage an audience. So one of the things that I want to observe is that there's an allegory. To a hammer, everything is a nail, right? Most marketers are tacticians. And so to them, their single tactic or their group of tactics is their strategy. But a tactic is not a strategy, and a strategy is not an outcome. And so the first thing that is obvious in business, but becomes less so when promoting a book and getting your ideas out there and differentiating your business based on your ideas from the ideas of others, is that you have to start with the outcome. What is the outcome we're creating? It's not just we're writing a book. That's a book is a tactic. A bestseller campaign is a strategy. That's not an outcome, right? An outcome is, I want my book to get, with John Maxwell on a title where he wanted to get 1 million people to tell a story of an action of significance that they took, right? So cool, we have an outcome. Now we have to come up, the next thing that you have to come up with is the measurement metric, right? Because I want to reach 1 million people is fine, but if you don't have a way of measuring that you've done that, there's no way to know that's occurred. You and I can sit here on this call or privately and tell stories all day, and there's no way for John Maxwell to be able to validate that he hit 1 million. And so what that then dictated, once we had the measurement metric, was what the strategy was. And so what we did, noting that John Maxwell is the most well-known expert on leadership in the world, is we created a campaign where he promoted his audience into a leadership assessment, so that we could define in 4 quadrants. We use Myers-Briggs in this case, but we defined that there were 4 different types of leaders. And so when the folks took the assessment, it's like, cool, we're going to tell you about you. And then after the assessment, we said, cool, now that we've told you about you, John has created a 1-week challenge for your whatever your leadership result type was, where you're gonna watch a 3-minute video from John every day. You're gonna take an action, and you're gonna come back and share your story about what happened when you took that action, right? And so, cool, now we're getting people, we're communicating to our audience based on the 4 quadrants of leadership type, and we're getting them to take a daily action. That action is getting them a result. They're doing it publicly, so they're releasing oxytocin. They're coming back into the platform that we created, and they're sharing their story, releasing dopamine. Both of those 2 things then cement the memory into their being, their body, and now we're capturing story. And then at the end of the week, we invited them to do a 30-day journey with John, where they could take what they've done for a week and turn it into a lifetime of significance, right? And the 30-day challenge was exactly like the 7-day, or the journey was exactly like the challenge, where it was a daily video with a daily action with capturing stories, right? So cool. Now we've got a strategy, and then things like traffic, PR, or buying ads, or whatever else that drives into those are tactical things that drive into the strategy. Now, no, the book is part of this. It's just a tactical element, and it's what opens up the conversations that are happening.
So here's my question from a sales perspective. I'm always interested when I hear a disconnect in a process somewhere. So I'm interested from your perspective, where was the disconnect when you originally started working with clients who, even though you delivered exactly what you said you were going to deliver, they expected more? Was it just the automatic assumption that if I get on the New York Times bestseller list, I don't have to do anything else? If I can just do that, it's going to blow up. It's going to help my business.
That's basically it. So,
but that's not what you represented, right? And that's why I think it's important that people hear that. It's one thing to deliver what you say you're going to do, it partially and not hit everything. But when you have one finite goal and you deliver on that, and people still aren't happy, expectations aren't real up front. It's interesting to me that you recognize that and you morphed it into another business opportunity to also do that as well, because I do think they go hand in hand. And I do think that the majority of the people just automatically make the assumption that they're going to get invited to Good Morning America because they're on the, New York Times bestseller list, right? Because it's perceived as prestigious.
Well, even with that, when I started as a publisher, and by the way, the reason I had a disconnect was that as a publisher, my roles and responsibilities were technical in nature. They were about making sure that the I's were being dotted, T's were being crossed, the buttons were being pushed, the pullers, the levers pulled, all of that. It wasn't, I didn't have to worry about the author side. It was just all of the mechanical stuff. But when I first started in publishing, one of the really interesting and funny things that people would say is, man, if you just, because the Oprah Winfrey Show was still on air back then, and they'd say, oh, if you just get me on Oprah, it would make all the difference in the world. And here's where that mindset is wrong. Even if I got you on Oprah, doesn't mean anything. Actually, we had an author at Bard Press, Pierce Howard, who wrote a book titled The Owner's Manual for the Brain. It was about a 1,500-page literal manual on how the neurology of the brain works. 4-color book, beautiful. In the 90s, he would go on Oprah once a year, which for a segment, and that morphed into a full show, which then morphed into a full week of Pierce Howard being the primary expert on her show, talking about how the brain works connected to whatever subtopics that they wanted to talk about. And so, how many books do you think that Howard sold being on Oprah for a week?
10,000 maybe.
So yeah, people think 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. There are examples of fiction authors who will sell 100,000 from just one segment, right? But what we noted was the audience of Oprah was stay-at-home moms. Educated or not, they're stay-at-home moms. How many of those stay-at-home moms want to buy a 1,500-page manual on the brain?
Zero. Maybe a very, very small amount, right?
We'd sell, some years we'd sell 1,000, some years we sold up to 3,000, I think was our peak year. Like we sold some so that we could, the reach was wide enough, but right, just getting on a show, even Good Morning America, the Today Show, or anything else, that's a tactical thing, right? That's right. In business, you've got traffic, engagement, and conversion. So cool, you've got a traffic source, Oprah or the Today Show or whatever else. What is the efficacy of that traffic source, and then what's the engagement model? How are you engaging those customers once you've driven them somewhere, and then how do you convert them? One of the things, as an example, with PR that I tell all my clients is we never tell the customers to go buy the book at the bookstore. We say, in fact, hey, you know what you should do? I've got an assessment, a quiz, a report, something else on my website. Go get that. Why? Because
you can track it.
Well, it's not like that. It's the psychological relationship that you're building with your audience. You were talking earlier about the idea of being an authority, right? When you sell ideas, when you sell information, what you're talking about is changing body, mind, or soul, right? You're talking about something that other people have different values and beliefs on than you, and so you're changing someone's mind. That's very different than selling a commodity. Commodities, we don't have even if we have brand loyalty to a commodity is very distinctly different. As an example, if I go into the grocery store to buy a can of soup, I might have a bias towards Healthy's Choice as an example for soup. But if Campbell's soup, the same kind of soup that I would normally buy Healthy Choice, is 1/4 of the price, I'm probably going to buy the Campbell soup because while I prefer Healthy Choice, the price makes a difference to me. That's because it's a transactional based mindset. When you sell ideas and thoughts, it's not about transaction, it's about relationship. And the things that are done transactionally in sales violate the ability to build a relationship with somebody, right? It's kind of like dating. I defer to most direct response marketers as douchebag marketers. And the reason that I do is that they have the same philosophy and mindset and basic set of actions as a pickup artist. What is the objective of a pickup artist? To get in a woman's pants. What is the objective of a direct response marketer? To get into their customers' pants, to pull out their wallets, right? It's the same mindset. And the conversion rate, we can go really deep if you want, but the actual process and numbers and all of them are a perfect corollary. Well, there's plenty of research from a relationship standpoint to be able to tell you that one night stands have less than 3% chance of turning into a long-term relationship, right? And so when someone gets into transactional marketing, expecting and in thought leadership, expecting a long-term relationship, they're doing it wrong. It's not about the transaction, it's about the relationship. And that's where we look at how do we translate what you do in sales in an intimate environment, right, into marketing and advertising, which happens in a non-intimate environment. What we're doing right now is an intimate conversation because we can see each other, we can change the way that we dialogue and engage based on the conversation. But your audience who's watching this, they're not engaging with us live, right? So they're not having an intimate engagement. They're having a non-intimate engagement with us. The value of a podcast or this kind of discussion is that because you and I are intimate, we're able to trigger the mirror neurons in your audience so that there's an emulation of intimacy. It's still not intimate, but it has an emulation of intimacy based on this conversation. So when we look then at selling a book, we look at what is the internal consideration of the individual who wants to buy the book, right? And the thing that people miss in business is that in an intimate relationship, whether it's a pair bonded relationship or whether it's a friendship or anything else, there are 4 currencies that are exchanged: time, energy, information, and emotion. And business is exactly the same, except for one variation. Time, energy, information, and money replaces emotion as the currency that's exchanged. But those currencies can be, the other 3 currencies can be equally as valuable, if not more valuable, than the currency of money. So the example that I would give is, which currency are we asking our customers to spend when we ask them to buy a book?
Money initially to buy it, time to read it.
So the actual consideration that they're making is time. I won't speak for you, but I, on my shelf, have a bunch of books that are just shelf help, meaning I've never read them. They're just helping my shelf, right?
Hey, man, it's my New Year's resolution this year. I'm doing good. I'm in February, and I've already read 3, but I've probably got 500 more to go. I 100% agree with that.
For most people, their consideration is, when looking at buying it, is, will I spend the time to read the book? Because if Roy H. Williams says, to win the customer's money, you must first win their time. And so the consideration is, will I spend 4, 6, or 8 hours reading the book? Now, if the customer, their potential audience member, doesn't have a pre-existing relationship with you, meaning they're not already engaging with you in some capacity, and they're hearing about you for the first time on a radio show or a podcast or whatever else, cool, we spend 30 minutes together. Is it fair for me to say, we spent 30 minutes, now go spend 6 hours reading my book? Like, the jump is too big. So when we look at doing PR, what we're looking at is, cool, we're a TV, the data shows a 2 to 3 minute segment. We had 2 to 3 minutes. So going to a book is not the appropriate thing, right? We want to go from that to, hey, can I get them to spend 10 minutes with us? Or can I get them to share a micro amount of information? Spend some other currency other than money so that we can build trust with them, so that we can build that relationship, so that we have the opportunity to change their hearts, minds, bodies, or souls.
Makes perfect sense. And I think that that is probably, if I had to guess, where a lot of people miss. Because I can tell you, just listening to what you said as you were talking, I'm like, man, I didn't do half bad based on what this guy's saying. And when you got to that part, I'm like, that's where I missed the boat when I wrote my first book, because the first book that I wrote, titled The Extra 2 Minutes, actually did better than I would have expected. It did pretty well. The entire premise is you can do it this way, or you can spend just 2 minutes longer as a salesperson, do it this way, and it's going to be an absolutely amazing difference to the person that you're presenting to, gifting, whatever it is, whatever you do, just take that extra little bit of time, even though it feels like you don't have it, and it will be a monumental difference in the long run. And so website that corresponds with the book. When you read it, it reads, very storyteller like, but also kind of instruction manual, leads you back to a website where when you get to the end of the chapter, there's a video that expounds on the lesson. So you're hearing me talk more. There's a download of the actual tools that I use, that I talk about in the book, that you can get. And if I'm being completely transparent, I got lucky on some of that stuff, but it ended up working out pretty well for me, because I do have a general understanding of how to build relationships online to some degree. Having the video there is extremely important. If I can't be in front of you in person or live on something like this, that's the next best thing. One of the best things I ever did was, instead of having my calendar link to book with me, just take you to a booking link, it actually takes you to a place where there's a video that talks. And the one you used for the podcast is different than the one that I use professionally. But it's, hey, I'm David. I just wanted to introduce you. I'm happily married to Andrea. I have 4 awesome kids and 2 golden retrievers, blah, 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 blah. And I'm getting the barriers broken down to get the human connection, so that when the people jump, I'm like, man, you're exactly like you were in the video. That's amazing, but having the downloads and giving the tools, I get the trust, I get the credibility, but where I missed was, how do I get them to some place to where we can build that on the front end for people who I don't know? Because the fact is, before I ever wrote the book, I had a podcast. Before I ever wrote the book, I had a YouTube channel. I did public speaking in the industry. People wanted my book because they were supporting me as their friend or somebody that they knew, and it gained momentum there. Then when they read it and realized, wow, this guy, actually did a reasonable job writing this, I should recommend this to some other people. Then all of a sudden that started to take off. Then I realized, you know what? I'm missing an opportunity if, when I go speak publicly, I'm not traveling with books. So I made that a part of what I did, where I would tell the people, as part of my engagement fee, that I would provide everybody a hand-signed copy of the book when I went, and I would have it shipped ahead of time. I'd show up, I'd have a signing table, all of these things, man. But this is me with a degree in marketing, who's just a hack trying to figure out things as I go and cobbling it along. And that one thing that you said about getting people someplace where you can begin to get their trust, to get them to commit their time, that's the part that I missed. And it would be really interesting for me. Obviously, it's not Back to the Future. I don't have a time machine, but if I would have done that, how much better would I have done? Now, don't get me wrong. It's not like we sold 1 million copies of the books or anything, but I did better than what you would probably, the average person would probably guess that it did. And it continues to sell today, 3, 4, 5 years after I released it. But I just feel like if I would have done that, it would have been a completely different experience on the front end. And the momentum that would have created would have parlayed into my second book and the other things that I've done. And, that in and of itself would create enough of a grumble that you would get invited to go to places. You would have people take your call to even inquire about stuff like that. And as far as going out and getting media attention or any of that, I run an insurance agency, brother. I don't have time for all of that, right? So knowing that somebody like you exists that I could outsource that stuff to is like gold to me for the next time I'm ready to get my thoughts out on paper, because I'm good at what I'm good at, and I'm probably an average marketer. So why am I wanting to be average and getting the word about something that's a passion project for me, that really, quite honestly, is some of the most intimate and deepest thoughts that I have about how I conduct myself in my career?
Yeah. So that's you're exactly right. The reality is that most people do things from a tactical mindset, right? You didn't publish the book because you're like, cool, we're going to create this entire buyer reader journey through building a relationship and meeting their needs. It was your view of how to help people, which is not wrong. But my ideal clients, we start before the book is ever conceived, because what we say is, what is the outcome? What's the measurement? Then we say, who is the customer? And we use a process that you're probably familiar with called buyer personas. Um, it's been bastardized to be called in a very cheap way, very light version of personas called avatars. But the idea is that you create segmentations of your audience, and we steal from Hollywood in this capacity. When Aaron Sorkin writes a show like West Wing, before they ever write a lick of script, he will write the backstory on every single character in the show, because good shows aren't about story arc. Story arc would be like an action movie, Star Wars or Indiana Jones or whatever else. Like, something happens, you solve the problem, and you're done. Character arc is about a character starting at one point, noting the backstory, things happen, and knowing how they're going to respond within the character arc towards them changing to become another person. When we're dealing with thought leadership, it's the same thing. Our objective is to get the customer to be able to go through their arc and be able to change in whatever capacity we can help or support them, right? So knowing their backstory. So we create these buyer personas up front, and we use Myers-Briggs again, and we give these folks names and photos, and we know all their backstories, and we know what precipitory event has brought them to the point where they're interested in what we're offering right before we start any of the marketing. So that when we get to ads, we know their felt need, both stated and unstated, where they've been, the things that turn them on, that turn them off, and what will delight them throughout the customer journey, through the buyer persona journey, as they go through their own character arc, their own arc. And this then allows us to map out, again, if we know what our objectives are and we align that with our customers, cool. Now we can map out what the strategy is to create the outcome, and now we can determine and define what the tactics are that support that strategy.
It goes back to everything else, man. You've done this plenty of times. You fine-tuned it. You figured out what your secret sauce is that makes this stuff work. It does, again, our most valuable asset for any of us is our time, which is why we got to get people to commit to the time first. The money's the easy part. Like, honestly, there's no emotion in business decisions for me whatsoever. It's honestly interesting that you said that about how emotion is what's replaced by money, because I think that too many times we allow emotion to get into business and it takes the place of that monetary decision. And that's when you run into issues, when if you're looking at business from a monetary position only, those decisions aren't difficult to make. They're black and white. Data tells you how to make them. And so too many times we allow the emotion to get in and cloud our judgment, when the reality is, numbers tell you, I don't clean my own house. Is there a reason why? Yeah, because for every week I can pay somebody $140 to come in and clean our house, and they can do that over a course of 4 or 5 hours that they're there. I can promise you I make a lot more money than what I would make over 5 hours for a total of $140. Makes zero sense whatsoever. However, there's a subset of our population, namely our parents and people who are older, who don't necessarily think that way. And I'm viewed as lazy because I hire somebody to come in and clean my house instead of doing it myself. Now, on the contrary, we cut our own grass. Why? Because I enjoy it. It's therapeutic to me. I understand that I could outsource it for a lot cheaper, but I actually gain something that makes my life more peaceful by doing the cutting the grass and everything else. And the other reality is, nobody's going to please us. Nobody's going to do it as well as we are in that scenario.
My wife loves doing laundry. Like, we've got the best stuff, because she just loves doing laundry. She just enjoys it. So yeah, there's a difference between work and pleasure, right? Yeah, but I love that example. Both that you like cutting grass, but have other people take care of things that you don't want. It's also why, as business owners, Unless we are an accountant, we don't do our own accounting. Unless we are a marketer, we don't do our own marketing. We hire other people, employees, and other agencies to do things for us because we should be focused on what we do best, not on the other parts. We have to understand them. We have to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to. But you're not. I don't believe that most of us are meant to be experts at everything, but at the one thing, as Gary Keller and Jay Papasan said in their book, that is core to the individual. Like, go do that one thing better than anybody else, and then have other people do their one thing around you.
100%. What have we missed, man? I feel like we've kind of covered what you do. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to get out?
Well, I think that I've harped on a little bit, but I think what's important is whether it's a book or a marketing campaign or a new initiative or a product or service launch, a couple of things to remember. One, you're dealing with humans, and their physiology and psychology is always going to be the same. So don't transactionalize them. Your audience, don't become a douchebag, right? Don't become a pickup artist. You want the sale, but at the end of the day, even insurance, you're not just giving a financial tool. You're helping to change their lives. You're helping to create security and stability, and actually meet some emotional needs as well as financial needs that your customer has, right? So,
well, to your point, though, I would tell you you're 100% spot on. However, douchebag marketers and the messaging that goes out is, to use your term, bastardized and commoditized what we do to the point where it's a chase of price to the bottom. And that value proposition is very difficult to ever even have the opportunity to present to somebody, because it's all about, let me get the cheapest price, let me get the cheapest price, when the reality is the cheapest insurance is typically the most expensive in the long run, because there's a reason it's so cheap.
Well, and that in part that goes back to what we discussed about the buyer personas, who your audience is, right? There is, for virtually any product or service, including books, by the way, there are the folks at the very bottom who have no platform and have no money, who don't have the ability to do the things the right way. So they're just doing it for the sake of doing it, and they're going to fail, because even if they had the absolute cure for cancer, if you don't play within the understanding the rules, the systems of that game, you can't succeed. So the reality is that what we want to do is to define, based on who our customer base is, what they're likely able to do within their journey. And also note that different customers might be at different places in their life, where they might be a 25-year-old kid just out of college who has a first-time job, who needs one type of insurance, and then gets married at 30 and needs another, and then needs something else, another product at 40, and another product at 50 as their life advances, right? But I think that what people do is that they glob all the products and services together, and if we, as the salespeople, the business owners, if we allow, the customer will try to productize or to transactionalize what we're doing and minimize the work that we're doing. And so that then becomes incumbent on us and how we put our business together and our messaging and languaging together, to be able to dictate back to those potential clients. No, we don't just sell insurance. That's a tool in our tool belt that we use. What we're really about is creating, I'm making this up, but generational wealth and stability for you and your family. And we don't compromise our values or our model. Like, we have a proven model that works, and we know that when this is applied, that you're going to get your success. The others, how everybody else is doing it is incomplete, right? So there's absolutely a way to position you as an expert. This is where we started the call, to be able to change the dynamic of the conversation. If somebody finds out about you and they see this is who you are, it's more difficult for them to come in and to try to tell you to be transactional when you're demonstrating to the world that you are not transactional.
No, I agree with that completely. 100%. So here's my question for you, man. You're a wealth of information. You've given us a ton. I know that there is so much more to this. And I'm very grateful that you've shared as much as you have, because I've connected the dots on a lot of things, but I've just enough to know that I'm not going to connect the dots on all of it. So, for anybody listening to this that wants to learn more about you and what you're doing, what's the best way for them to connect with you to figure that out?
I would say, from an information standpoint, bookretreat.com, BOOKRETREAT.com, bookretreat.com. I try to keep things simple. If somebody's actually at a point where they could spend $100,000 to $500,000 on book marketing, promotabook.com is our bestseller business and service site, right? But for the most part, we engage folks over at bookretreat.com.
Good deal. Well, I would encourage everybody listening to this to head over to bookretreat.com if any of this resonated with you. And for those of you who balked at the cost of it being $100,000 to $500,000 to promote a book, then get over to bookretreat.com and build yourself enough money to where you can go get the real deal down the road, which is probably exactly why Michael set it up the way that he did. The reality is, if you're a first-time author, unless you're extremely passionate and independently wealthy, you're not going to be able to afford a PR service to go out. And I don't think that Michael would even recommend that you do that on the first run. So go over, get it. Look, people are marketing minded. Get into the funnel, get into bookretreat.com, learn what's going on over there, learn more about what he's doing. But more importantly, if this is something that you want to do, engage with the professional. If I teach you anything, I know that the people listening to this podcast use the techniques for sales and marketing and some of the risk management stuff that we talk about and insurance and all of that. But the best piece of advice that I could give you right now is, for something that you're not an expert or a professional at, hire out the person who is. I promise you, even though the monetary sting may hurt a little bit initially, you will always come out ahead in the long run if you let somebody who's the best at what they do represent you. And too many times we think we can fight through it, or we let our own ego get in the way. And the reality is, life is always going to kick us in the mouth. And I can tell you, I went about my books for one very specific reason on an Amazon self-publishing, because it was quick, it was cheap, and I knew I could figure out how to do it. But I can assure you, after doing two and having marginal success, the next one that I release, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use a professional to do it and look forward to doing so. So, Michael, I appreciate you taking time to come out and chat with us. Any parting comments before I let you go?
Absolutely. And it's actually going to be reflective of what you just said. Again, Roy H. Williams was my first New York Times bestselling author 26 years ago. We actually co-wrote a book together titled Pendulum: How Past Generations Shape Our Present and Predict Our Future. And it's a New York Times bestseller. But about 20 years ago now, maybe 21 even, he and I was a young kid then, we were in New York City, and we were walking the streets of New York City after Book Expo America, which was at the time the largest book event in the world, where publishers display their upcoming seasonal books. Anyway, we were walking the streets, and Roy said to me, "Michael, the winners and losers in life are determined when the teams are picked. There are two teams that are essential for your success. The first are those that select you to be on their team, and the second are those you select to be on your team." What I would urge your audience is to make sure that they have been selected by the right people to be on their team, and that they go out and surround themselves with the right people to be on their team.
I couldn't have said it any better. No reason for me to add anything. I appreciate you being on, man. This has been an absolutely electric episode. Obvious to me, there's one guy on this conversation that probably read the 1,500-page book on the way the human brain is wired, and a few more after that. But stuff like that's really what stimulates me, man, because when you can get that granular and you can look at the science behind it. Now, I'm going to be completely transparent. I don't know that my attention span would allow me to get through the book. But when you draw me in, when you start talking about biological reactions and psychological reactions, because I think that's something that a lot of people truly don't know about. And it's science. Like, it helps if you know those things, point of sale or marketing or otherwise.
We probably should do another call. I'm happy to go into it. But here's what I would say about someone who has adult ADHD and who likes science but has a hard time doing it. When I was 11, I used to deliver a paper, had a paper route to the college kids at BYU. And I met a gentleman who was on the BYU track team. He was from Ghana. His name was Soa Marley. He was a prince from one of the tribes of Ghana. Anyway, we became friends. I was 11, he was 19 or whatever. We became friends, and he invited me to watch a football bowl game. I believe it was in 91, BYU versus Texas A&M in the Holiday Bowl. And it was a bad game. But when I arrived at his home, he had a big, giant metal bowl of popcorn. And he said, "How long do you think it'll take you to eat it?" I was like, "There's no way I'm going to eat that whole bowl of popcorn." Well, 4.5 hours later, at the end of the game, I'd eaten the entire bowl of popcorn. And he said, "Oh, I thought you couldn't eat the bowl of popcorn." I said, "I guess I did." He said, how did you do that?" And I'm like, "I don't know." He said, "You did it one kernel at a time." And so in any kind of learning, I would suggest the same thing. You don't need to consume a 1,500-page book today, but if you read one page today, in 3 years, you'll get through it, and you'll be able to retain that information and be able to use it.
10 minutes a day, man. That's my goal. If I can read for 10 minutes a day, I can read 300 pages in a month and get through a normal book, maybe even two, depending on the length of them. I actually pushed that. I read the Almanac of Novel Ravikant recently, and his was to push. And he said the smartest people read for an hour a day. So I'm pushing hard to try and read for an hour a day in 2025. And I will be man enough to admit it's a very difficult challenge to hit and read that much, especially if you're not traveling. If I was traveling as much as I used to, and I was on a plane, reading for an hour a day would not be a problem at all. But with 4 kids and all of that happens when I'm here at home, it's just not going to happen on a regular basis. But still, and the other way I look at it is if I commit to or make my goal an hour and I only hit 30 minutes, I still read for 20 minutes more than I would if I was only reading 10, and I'm still ahead of the majority of the people out there. So not that I want to lose against my goals, but at the same time, it is a way to compromise, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good deal. Well, listen, man, we will definitely have you back on. I would love to have that conversation. Really enjoyed this one. And I'm thankful that you reached out to me on LinkedIn, because normally I'm going to go back and read that exchange, because there had to be something in what we talked about today that you used in your outreach to me that got me to bite. And that does not happen. I am very well known of being a massive critic for automated LinkedIn inbox spamming and everything else. So the fact that you even got a response to me has me like chomping at the bit to go see what was it he said that triggered here. And then when I find it, I'm going to let you know, and then we'll book another one to have you come back on, because I'd love to keep the dialogue going.
That's fantastic.
All right, my man. Have a good weekend. I'm actually flying out tomorrow. I'm going to be in Italy for a week. So first time over there, looking fun to checking that out. Thankful that I'll be walking everywhere, so hopefully I can neutralize the calories that I consume while I'm there. But I've got a standard deviation I'm willing to accept when I get on the scale when I come back, considering it's the first time. So have a great weekend, and really appreciate you being on today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and have an amazing time in Italy.
Thank you.